Okay, so tell me, what do you do when ID is missing, class is repeated, and the XPath feels like solving a Sudoku puzzle? It's pretty straightforward. You go to the ultimate savior of Selenium Locators, which is the CSS selector. So let's be honest, writing locators can feel like playing a minesweeper. One wrong click and boom, no such element exception occurs. Okay. But once you understand the CSS selector properly, you are going to use that more often and it's going to become your superpower. So in this segment, I'll break down the most commonly used CSS selector types, and that will make your Selenium script cleaner and smarter. So we'll first understand logic behind each of the selector and then look at real examples. All right. So let's get started. The first one in the list is my ID selector. So I have written down the classifications here, also a hint of what it is and when to use it, right? So if you see my ID selector, so ID is pretty straightforward. It is the first and most direct selectors in your CSS approach. So in HTML, ID are meant to be unique. Only one element on the page should have a particular ID. And when locating elements using ID in CSS, we simply prefix the ID value with a hash. So the format use hash to be followed by the ID name. And this makes it very efficient and unambiguous. Alright, so you just have one ID, you just have to go there, click on it. Alright, so moving to the example of it, let's try to run this page and then I'll show you what we are doing. Okay, I'm just going to open my application using this script. Okay, so here I am. I just executed. My page opens, and I'll walk you through what I have done here. So in this page, I basically created this to practice CSS examples. Along with the field, I have given the CSS reference as well, how you can access all the types of CSS combinations that's possible. Towards the end, you have different type of CSS selectors listed here. So what we are going to do here is we are going to first inspect these. So if you see, the ID here is written as username. Now what do we do with this ID? We'll use this ID with CSS selector. Okay, not by ID. We are going to use it with CSS selector. So how do we do it? Now we are going to write driver dot find element by CSS selector, and here I am going to paste the value of my ID, which is username, right? Paste it. And what I want to do, I don't want to click it, but instead I want to send keys. All right, so send keys, and I'll write here username. So let's say I'll write it as Psudo's. Let's run this and see if it is able to locate my element using the CSS selector. So if you see, it has written Psudo here in my username, right? Pretty straightforward and simple. Just remember, you have to use a hash when you are using ID, right? On the similar ground, we have classes also. So class is again a shared label that can be applied to multiple elements. If you look at here, these division tag have classes, which is field, 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 field. So one tag can have a class name, and that class name can be shared across multiple tags. So it's like multiple buttons might look the same but behave differently. Okay. So in CSS selector, class names are prefixed with a dot to indicate that you are targeting a dot. So let's see an example on class again. So let's say I'm going to use this email. I'm going to use a variable. Let's say email is equals to driver.find element by CSS selector, and I will say what is the class? It's input email, right? So I'll say hash. Instead of hash, I'm going to use a dot, right? Because I'm targeting the class, right? And this should be elements because I am expecting 2 elements to be returned, right? Now what do I do next? I have an email here. In this email, I will say my email of 0, right? Because I am targeting the first email text box. So I'll say learn with psudo @gmail.com. So this is how I'm going to target my first email when I'm using a class reference, right? So this is a basic example. I'm just trying to demonstrate how class works. Okay, so class will never, class can give you an unique element, but there are high chances that class is going to return multiple web elements, right? So it entered learn with psudo @gmail.com, right? And what if I want to write the same thing in my second email text box also? So I just have to increment this value here, right? And I run this. Now it should open. It will enter the name and it will enter the other two email fields as well. Okay. So it entered learn with psudo in both of these fields. Clear? So that's how you are going to use class. But remember, you have to use a dot reference before the class name. All right. So moving on, we are moving to the tag and attribute selector. Okay. So now this is something a bit more powerful. So you combine your HTML tag names with the attribute values as well. So instead of just relying on the ID or class, you can directly say I want an input tag where placeholder or the attribute equals enter password. Okay. So this method makes your locator very specific and very readable. Let's take an example on this one. So let's open our application again. This is my password field. And if I inspect this, what happens? It says the input type, the tag is again input, and it has the placeholder option which says enter password. So what I want to do here is I want to club the input type and the placeholder as well. When I say input and the placeholder, what I'm trying to do is I'm using this tag as my primary locator, and to support this tag and find a unique element, I'm using this placeholder property as well inside this tag. Now if you see, there is another input here. This is also password, only the ID is different, and the placeholder value is re-enter password, right? So let's take an example on how you are going to club the corresponding properties from the page. Okay, let's head back to our IDE and we are going to say driver dot find element by CSS selector, and inside this what it is. Oh yes, and there is one more thing before we move on. I just want to highlight. So if you are new here and if you are trying to learn things and you are figuring that finding a CSS is quite difficult for you, so there is an easier way. You just have to click on the element, right click, copy, and you'll say copy selector. Now to see if this is working or not, you just have to do Control F and in this text box just paste it. Alright, so it generated an ID based CSS selector which is pass1, and if you go here, it already is highlighting your text box, right? So this is how you verify whether whatever you are using is correct or not before using it in the script, right? So but I'm not going to use this approach. What I'm going to write here is I want to target based on the tag name. So I'll say input. So as soon as I write input, it's going to highlight all the input tags in this page. So if you see here, there are 1 of 27 matches. Now also remember this, when you try to search write input here, it's going to search everywhere, be it in the CSS, be it in the tag names or the class names here, or it can be a text on your web page as well. So don't confuse between the actual search result that you are seeing here and the actual input elements here. So my input elements might be limited. Okay, so it's hardly around 10 or 12, right? But it returns 27. That is because it's also referring to these class names and whatever text I have in the page. If it has input there, it is going to search for it, right? All right. So inside this, what I want to do, I have listed out that my field is an input, but I want to use its property to identify it. Right. So I'm going to give a square bracket, and what property I want? I want the placeholder property. All right. Now my placeholder property is selected, and what I want to have in my placeholder is, in a single quotes, you have to write the placeholder property name. So it says enter password, right? And close the square bracket. So if you click on this, so it highlights this object. But if you see here, it says 1 of 3. Now let's see what is this. If you see this, this is also a text on your application or on your website, right? So if you see here, this is a label, and this label is what? This is what I have written here, right? If you check the next one, what is it? It is again a label here. So don't get confused in your approach. You just have to target the actual tags or the actual web elements rather than just the text on your page. All right, so this is my CSS selector that I have generated. So in this, what I'm going to do is I'll paste the value here, and in this password I am going to send keys password 1. Let's run this. So it's going to write the name. It has entered both the email. Now it has entered the password as well, right? So going back to where we were looking at, so we had entered a password using the placeholder property of my input tag. Now similarly, if you want to enter in the second one, you can use the same. You can change the placeholder value to re-enter password, and it would feed in the next field as well. In this, just remember, this is your basic syntax. You just have the tag name, and the property that you want to use should be followed in a square bracket, and your value should be within quotes. Okay. Now moving on to the next one, you can also do a tag and class combo. So sometimes where you want to narrow your search to specific tag with specific class. So that's where tag and class combo comes in. You write the tag name first, followed by a dot and the class name. Okay. There shouldn't be any spaces there. This makes sure you are selecting the right type of element with the right design. Now moving on to an example of this. Again, going to my application, what I want to do, I want to target a tag name with a CSS property. So let's take this field as an example. Okay, so I have a bio field, and if I want to inspect this, so this is my text area, that is my tag, and it has a class input field. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to club my text area and my class value as well, right? How do I do that? It's again the same approach that we were doing earlier, but a little change in the syntax. So same thing, driver dot find element by CSS selector, and here, where is my tag name? This is my tag name, text area. This goes just like that in my script. So I'll write text area. Now the next what I want to target is a class of it, right? So what is the class here? The class is input field. So in this, class is denoted by a dot, and I'll paste this, right? And in this, I'll write this is a class and tag combo. All right. Let's run this. Again, opening my page. All right. So it came here, it entered. This is a class and tag combo, right? So these are the 4 more primarily used approaches in your CSS. There are others as well, but make sure that you are very confident with these 4 type of approach, and then you move on to the next ones. I suggest you practice and practice more on different type of web pages. Okay, and for sure you are not going to solve everything just by these 4 types of these 4 approaches. You need to modify your approach also.